From WFAA-TV, this is the News 8 special, Tragedy at Texas A&M.
We are the Aggies are we, true to each other, as Aggies can be.
Today, at 2:28 a.m., Texas A&M University experienced a tragedy that has captured the hearts and minds of Aggies on campus and throughout the world.
That somebody had told me that.
Hundreds of mourners packed a campus coliseum tonight to remember the victims of today's collapse of a bonfire structure.
Many others are still at the scene, searching for additional victims still missing. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for News 8 Special on the tragedy at Texas A&M.
Let's bring you up to date on the latest now. 9 students were killed today, and for the latest on what's going on in College Station, let's go to Channel 8's Valerie Williams.
The bonfire was 3/4 of the way finished, and student crews were almost 45 feet in the air when the first hint of trouble sounded.
I heard a distinct cracking sound as it started going, and then it just kind of shoved me into the wood.
Caleb Hill was on a swing wiring a log into place when the bonfire's center pole began falling away from him. The swing jerked upward in reaction, fracturing his wrist and nose. Caleb's friends higher up on the pile were not as lucky.
I believe that this is a tragedy that no amount of foresight or no amount of prevention or no amount of anything could have stopped, prevented, or even told us it was coming.
The stack collapsed around 2:30 this morning. Rescuers described dismantling the pile like working with pickup sticks. Each log was wired to 3 more. Around 9 a.m., someone heard tapping and a call went out for silence. A miniature TV camera and microphone were lowered on a wire.
So we were able to go into the stack and look around, and we located exactly where he was positioned. And then most of the early part of the morning was spent trying to shore up the stack so we could move into that area and get that young man out of there, which we did.
Unfortunately, that was the last miracle rescuers would find for the day. By 5, as the sun was close to setting, the fire chief said the tedious process of pulling log by log from the bonfire had put them far behind.
Whoa! Get a heat, nice and silent! 1, 2! Good job, boys!
To increase manpower, Texas A&M's football coach dismissed practice, and in a reverse of school tradition, the players became a 12-man team to move more logs. Meanwhile, school officials fought to quash rumors that the collapse was a result of horseplay.
And that was Channel 8's Valerie Williams reporting. Behind the numbers are the young lives cut short and the families in grief and pain.
Darkness has returned to the A&M campus again. Recovery efforts go on. Our colleague John McKay has been there all day, and he joins us now live. John?
Well, Scott and Gloria, good evening from the campus at Texas A&M University. I want you to first of all to look straight behind me if you possibly can, where the work crews continue even at this late hour, some 19 hours after the accident occurred. What has been going on all day long is they're trying to be moving very carefully, if at all possible. They're trying to go very carefully here because this log pile, we're told now, is still a bit on the unstable side. In fact, the numbers you gave at the top of the hour of 9 people dead, 28 injured, those numbers continue. We should add that there are 2 people apparently that are still trapped inside. That's the information we have been told. We have no indication yet of what their condition may be. Valerie Williams just a moment ago gave you an idea of exactly what was going on here. But now we want to switch to a story from Marianne Razouk.
Chris Richmond is a long way from his home in Northern Virginia. At a time when he needed his family most, during a crisis, he was not alone. The Aggie senior was helping build the bonfire when it collapsed, crushing many of his friends before his eyes. In no time, his Aggie family and Bryan residents were by his side to try and save lives.
As cold as it was, people were taking their own shirts off, giving it to them just to help out in some way.
Still, they felt helpless.
At first, we didn't know what was happening. Then we just, once it fell, you could just hear people yelling for help, and we were just trying to grab people that were, they had their legs hurt, arms. Trapped under logs.
As rescue efforts wore into the night, hundreds of grief-stricken residents sought comfort through helping students and helping each other. Donated water, soft drinks, and food were brought in by the carload. One woman bought out every blanket she could find in town. And the owner of a cellular phone store made sure every student could call home.
So we have about 10 phones so they can make phone calls anywhere in the United States. There's no charge or any obligation. We really deeply sympathize on this thing.
I'm actually proudest to be an Ag today, just by seeing what everybody was doing. Defines the Aggie spirit.
Here we go. Our Robert Riggs, as a matter of fact, is a graduate of Texas A&M University, and you know all of the traditions. This is one of the big ones, I understand.
And I'm class of 71, College of Architecture. And you being from a military family growing up in it, I know you understand this, but everybody always asks, what is the spirit of Aggie Land? This is something when you step on the campus, you first feel it. And you are taught the traditions by the upperclassmen, but you quickly begin to realize that there are a lot of people that have gone before you that have paid a price, and many of them that have sacrificed their lives in service for the country. My uncle was here in 1941 and later found himself in the infantry on a beach called Normandy. So you always, in the Riggs family, felt you had a lot to live up to in coming to this university.
You know, I think the people who did not go to school here, they've heard of some of the traditions. They've heard of the 12th man, but there's many more that are here.
Well, the 12th man is where the entire student body stands during a game, and this arose out of a game in the past in which all of the players were hurt, and a student in the stands suited up, ready to go on the field to assist the team. And it's been passed along as a tradition, and you find that in every aspect of life here. You know, we have a thing called midnight yell practice, in which the corps and the band gather at shortly before the strike of midnight and march into the football field here and have yell practice at midnight, and you usually have about 40,000 students there. Now, I brought my wife here a few years ago, who's a North Texas grad in theater arts, is about as far as you could get from this place, and you know, she watched all this, and she looked at me and she said, you know, you belong to a cult, but it's one we're proud to belong to.
You told me that this is so serious with A&M students that if you go to a pawn shop, for example, and see the ring, you're supposed to go get the ring.
Well, your class ring is prized, and the Former Students Association here, and you notice I say former, there's no ex-Aggies. It's always a former student. They have a policy with police departments across the state that if they find a stolen ring, and I've talked to some Dallas officers recently that were on the pawn shop detail, they found an Aggie ring in a pawn shop, obviously it had been stolen. They took it, sent it back to A&M. A&M pays the cost of it. You know, it's not something that's going to be out there. We're all proud of all of these traditions, and there have been a lot of people who have gone before us that have paid dearly for them.
You know, we have been out here for much of the day, and I think one of the things that's impressed most of us is the fact that normally in situations like this you get people that are trying to mug for the cameras and things like that, and all the students all day long have been working with the rescuers. They've been very quiet. They've been assembling. In fact, there have been thousands out there trying to help with trying to remove some of the discarded logs.
Well, I think this is part of the education you get out of the classroom here that happens with all of these traditions, and there is a respect for fellow man and the suffering and that has happened before, and it's you know, it's just not, it's out of character to behave that way. And you know, we're often the brunt of jokes, and we always just say that's a lot of jealous people.
Okay, Robert, thanks a lot. Sure appreciate it. There have already been 2 memorial services today, one at 4 o'clock and one at 7 o'clock. Our Byron Harris has been trying to keep up to date with all that. He joins us now live with more. Byron?
John, you can hear the diesels and all the engines behind me as they try to clean this up. But for this afternoon, this was a campus of 46,000 very somber people.
This has been an evening of memorial services that a small town will never forget. Tonight, students were turned away from an arena filled to capacity with people and sorrow.
I'm pretty disappointed. It'd be nice to get everybody in there.
For an hour, thousands of people moved in virtual silence to the Reed Arena.
It's gloomy.
Yeah, everybody's just kind of walking around with their heads hanging down. It's not the usual A&M or Aggie Land.
Aggie Land, as anyone who went to school here will tell you, is a state of mind. For For the last 18 hours, that collective consciousness has been numb. An individual leaned on individual to make sense of it.
The Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace.
In an impromptu service at the Student Center, they knit together in prayer circles, found each other's hands, and looked for words to explain it.
There's not any words that can be said that would make this all go away. There's not a magic sentence. There's not a certain thing that we could do. And in all of our minds from early this morning, we've been just asking why? Why? And the question is not so much why, but the question is what now?
Former President George Bush, whose library graces the A&M campus, was one of thousands who came to express their sympathy. But even for those whose careers as students were long past, it wasn't any easier to deal with the pain.
Heartfelt prayers and sympathies go out to the families and friends of those who have lost loved ones. Unless you've experienced the death of a child or a close friend, you don't know how this impacts you. To those injured, we will do all we can to support you in the days before you. Our sorrow is great, our pain is deep, and our suffering is immense. But the Aggie spirit truly comes together at a tragic time such as this.
As Aggies would hope, the spine of the institution appears to be stiffening in the crisis.
Help us to always remember our most recently departed friends, our classmates, our Aggie buddies. May this remembrance last forever.
Now, that service that we just saw, the media was not permitted into. It was a very calm, very polite refusal of folks who were kind of guarding that giant arena while that service went on, and they were in essence saying, this is our family and we're going to solve this ourselves. Back to you, John.
All right, thanks a lot, Byron. Again, the rescue efforts continue behind me here at the campus of Texas A&M University. What you see behind me is the remnants of the log pile, which at one time was about 40 to 45 feet high. It is now, I would imagine, down to about 15, maybe 20 feet high, and they're moving slowly but surely. They're having to do this once again, one log at a time. And the main reason is because it's still unstable. There is some indication that there are at least 2 people who are inside. We have no indication at this point of what their condition is, but Scott and Gloria, right now the moves here are going very slow but very sure. Back to you.
All right, thank you very much, John.
The prayers raised at that service that Byron was talking about on the A&M campus tonight were echoed in North Texas.
Aggie alums gathered at Highland Park United Methodist Church. Channel 8's Don Wall is there. Don?
Gloria, the church filled up tonight with former students from Texas A&M and their families. You can see many of them still here behind me. The silent vigil is over, but the people are still lingering, getting reacquainted with each other. They came to pray together for those who died and for those who were injured. A lot of these people are members of the Dallas chapter of the A&M Association of Former Students and their families. They came to pay their respects, to spend time with other Aggies, and to show their common sense of tradition and grief. We saw a lot of maroon shirts. People prayed silently in their own way. More than one of them told us, once an Aggie, always an Aggie.
I felt that I need to come down and to be with other Aggies to pay our respects to the people that have died. And it's something that's very tragic, and I thought it was very sad this morning. Being an Aggie and being proud of the traditions that we have. And unfortunately, the way I see it, there's a possibility that Bonfire will be the last.
I wanted to share my grief with other Aggies, and as I told my wife, A&M is really about honor and integrity, and I feel like whether it's these people that worked on the Bonfire and lost their lives, or people who lost their lives in world wars for the freedom of America, I think that's what A&M's about. I wanted to be around other Aggies.
Bonfire was a really big part of when I was a student and afterwards, and it was probably the biggest tradition as far as every student participated in Bonfire in some way, even if they didn't participate in all the other traditions. And it really hit home, so that's why we're all here.
It's just hard to deal with. It just seems like the whole state's in mourning because of this. It's just difficult.
What makes it so difficult? Is it the closeness that the students feel towards each other?
I think it's the camaraderie and just being an Aggie, it's just such a bond for everyone, and everybody feels the pain.
Everybody does indeed feel the pain here tonight. Take a look at these people. If David Chaka can zoom in, we'll take a look at the crowd. These are people from different classes. They come from all over Texas, many of them here from North Texas, of course, and they have a common sense of spirit, and it seems like they don't want to go home. They want to spend time talking with each other, again getting reacquainted and realizing that they share a common sense of grief. And as that young lady said, much of Texas seems to be in mourning right now. I'm Don Wall reporting live from the United Methodist Church of Highland Park. Back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Don. Now, the tragedy has hit one group especially hard, the mothers of Aggie students.
There are about a half dozen Aggie Moms clubs in North Texas. At one regularly scheduled meeting tonight, there were hugs and more than a few tears. About 100 women of the Dallas County Aggie Moms donned red ribbons emblazoned with tiny pictures of an Aggie bonfire. They devoted the beginning of their meeting to the students who were killed or injured in the accident. And the club president read the poem for fallen Aggies, Silver Taps.
You stand spellbound, you scarcely breathe. With heavy heart, you turn to leave. Your Aggie friend no more you'll see, till Silver Taps is blown for thee. Silver Taps at A&M will always be our farewell hymn to those who've gone to heights unknown. With silver taps, he journeys on.
The group displayed a makeshift shrine built with mementos from past bonfires, including a pair of senior boots, a helmet, and an axe handle. All of the trees used for the bonfire were cut by hand.
Still to come, it was his first year at Texas A&M, and he dreamed of one day owning his own computer store. How a North Texan who lost his life is being remembered tonight.
Plus, it takes tons of timber and some unusual engineering. We'll examine the challenges of building the largest bonfire.
And today's collapse adds to an already tragic year at Texas A&M. We'll explain after this.
It wasn't anything that anybody did. It was just the fact that a center pole snapped. Okay. Thus, probably as a result of people maybe stacking up logs too much on one side.
Tragedy at Texas A&M, a News 8 special, continues when we return. Tragedy at Texas A&M, a News 8 special, continues.
We are now able to tell you a little bit more about several of the victims lost in the tragedy at A&M this morning. Jerry Self from Arlington was a sophomore studying engineering technology. Brian McLean, a first-year agriculture student from San Antonio. Nathan West, a sophomore from Bel Air, Texas, was studying oceanography.
Jeremy Frampton from Turlock, California, was a senior about to obtain a degree in psychology. And Chad Powell, a sophomore studying computer engineering, was also an honor student from Keller. The 18-year-old Powell was a native of Keller.
Chad Powell had just begun his studies at A&M this semester. Channel 8's Anna Martinez joins us live from our Fort Worth newsroom to tell us more. Anna?
Gloria, all who knew Chad Powell loved him. He was active in church, community, and school. Both adults and students describe him as exceptional.
To the life we've known, which has prepared us extensively for whatever road we choose to take, I'd like to say goodbye.
Chad Powell said an eloquent farewell to students and faculty when he spoke as valedictorian last May. As he received his diploma and prepared to head to Texas A&M, he dreamed of someday opening his own computer company and designing software. The Keller High School principal, who knew him since middle school, says Chad had the potential to achieve anything he wanted.
He probably has 6 pages on his resume of things that he's done. He was very mature for his years. He was one that could get on our level and probably above our level, and he just was a great kid to know.
Classmates at Keller voted Chad most likely to succeed, but he'd already succeeded as an Eagle Scout, National Merit Scholar, and National Honor Society president. To his friends, he was an approachable role model.
He always had a smile. He was a great guy, valedictorian. Everybody loved him. He was part of everyone. Not everybody knew him all that well, but he still touched us all. It just broke my heart. He is a very great guy. I mean, honors everything perfect, and you know what I mean, and it just tore me apart.
The grief extends beyond Keller High School to the community. The student minister at his longtime church wants those who love Chad to remember his spirit.
Even though his absence is going to be sorely missed, knowing where he is gives a lot of comfort to those of us who knew him, and he leaves a legacy.
Those who knew Chad Powell say his legacy was love. He spoke with love when he said goodbye to classmates last spring.
Goodbye, teachers who helped to get us here today. Goodbye, friends who must go a separate way. And goodbye to the life we've known. To move on is the price we must pay.
And Keller students plan to gather near the school tomorrow morning to remember Chad Powell. There will also be a service tomorrow evening at Keller First Baptist Church, open to both A&M students and Keller students. Many in Arlington are also grieving tonight over the loss of a former student. 20-year-old Jerry Self graduated from Lamar High School in 1997. Channel 8's Karen Kelly reports.
The news that a nice young man from the neighborhood was killed spread quickly along the street where Jerry Self grew up.
It makes you feel sad when you just hear something like that in your neighborhood. We've had a lot in our neighborhood.
Self was 3 weeks shy of turning 21, a sophomore engineering major at Texas A&M. His parents left Arlington early in the morning for College Station after being told their son was missing, possibly one of several trapped in the Bonfire collapse, or maybe unaccounted for among the dozens of injured students at local hospitals.
So we held out hope for a little while.
But Lamar High School principal Jimmy Jones and Self's parents soon learned the young man was killed. A 1997 Lamar graduate, Self was on the student council and a football player. Many fondly remember him.
And he was very willing to jump in and tackle anything. He was always there, always a leader.
Jones said close to 50 of Lamar's graduates go off to Texas A&M each year. He admits Jerry Self is one he will never forget.
Yeah, you get close.
Karen Kelly, Channel 8 News, Arlington.
A sad day in Keller and in Arlington, and of course at A&M. Back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you very much, Anna. We know that throughout the day, phone lines in College Station have often been jammed.
But the close-knit Aggie community has ways around that problem. They have each other. Channel 8's Gary Reeves found that to be the case with some anxious parents.
Crews say they have heard moaning and tapping sounds.
I've cried all morning, so I'm hoping I'm cried out.
Sandy Woods is not an Aggie grad, but her father, her husband, and her oldest son are. Her youngest is at A&M right now, and so is her nephew. And he's been working on the bonfire.
Once I found my nephew was all right, I started thinking about the other children I knew from around the area that were down there.
She's been glued to the TV watching nonstop coverage on TXCN, Texas Cable News. She's hoping for news on a neighbor boy, J.J. Washam, who grew up with her kids.
Listed in critical condition, Tim Curley, J.J. Washam.
I guess I just keep wanting to hear good news. I was fortunate to see him take both of those kids out from under the pile today, and that was just such good news. And so I guess I'm just hoping for more of the same.
Hi, this is Don.
Many others looking for the latest have been calling this man.
Yes.
Don Crawford is president of the Aggie Corps of Cadets Association and a former cadet himself. His souvenirs include a painting of the bonfire in the making. Normally he's helping recruit cadets. Now he's dispensing news about them.
And anytime you lose somebody in the Aggie family, it affects all of us. Like today, with the phone calls I've had, that have literally been from all over the state of Texas and even out of state, all expressing grief and sorrow and what can I do to help.
For now, they hope and pray, and so do Aggie family members everywhere.
My hope is that they find all those missing kids alive, and they'll be just fine. That's my hope.
Gary Reeves, Channel 8 News.
Just ahead on this News 8 special, the strength of the human spirit. How a Sulphur Springs sophomore came to the aid only to become a victim himself.
And how Texans are helping by rolling up their sleeves. Details after this.
One of our principal concerns is our deep sense of loss and sympathy for the families and all of the students that will know these students, and all of the students and other Aggies that will be affected by this.
Tragedy at Texas A&M, a News 8 special, continues when we return. Tragedy at Texas A&M, a News 8 special, continues.
The tragedy at A&M has increased the demand for blood donations. Hundreds of people lined up and rolled up their sleeves in Houston. Those who participated in the emergency blood drive said it was one way they could help their fellow Texans.
Throughout the day, the American Red Cross supplied more than 300 units of blood in College Station. The Red Cross will open its Dallas Center at 1 Medical Parkway tomorrow, Saturday, and Sunday. The location, that's the northeast corner of LBJ in Webb Chapel. Also, for more information, you can call 1-800-GIVE-LIFE.
For more on the tragedy, we return to College Station and Channel 8's John McKay. John?
Gloria and Scott, the digging and rescue effort continues behind me. I want to tell you a little bit more about some of the people who were injured. As we told you, 9 students dead, 28 students who were injured. One of those students that was injured, we're told, tried to get some help here in the College Station area, but couldn't. So what did he do? He drove home to Sulphur Springs to Mom. Channel 8's Janet St. James has that story.
Cody Blunt drove home from college this morning, ignoring the new pain of an injured ankle, thinking only of the agony of classmates he'd left behind in a pile of logs.
I was thinking, wonder what's going on right now. How many people have they found? How many people have they pulled out?
As a member of the university EMS team, Blunt was among the first emergency rescue workers called to the stack. He'd worked there himself just days before.
It was something straight out of a movie. There were people scattered on the ground. There were people still hanging and still hung up inside the pile of wood. There were people draped on top, just in every position imaginable.
In the darkness before dawn, he searched for the living, trying to hold back panic when he found classmates his own age.
And there was a girl who I went up to check on, went up and checked the pulse, and no pulse. I looked up around me and saw 2 or 3 more bodies inside the logs. And
Blunt finally gave up his search when he injured himself during the rescue effort. Knowing hospitals had more serious problems, he headed home to Sulphur Springs, where family anxiously waited.
It's the phone call that all parents dread. Fortunately, it was him on the other end of the line. My heart goes out to the folks who got phone calls from other people this morning and not their own children.
As many as 70 students were building this traditional
The Blunts have searched the airwaves for any tidbit of news from College Station. Worried calls are pouring in about Cody's safety.
Well, thank you. Thank you for calling to check on me.
Friends know now he'll need their support to handle the emotional visions forever burned in his memory.
Oh, I'm so glad you're okay.
It's been a long day.
Really?
Come on in.
Janet St. James, Channel 8 News, Sulphur Springs.
Also tonight, there are questions that linger of just about the safety of all this. This is it's the largest, I understand, bonfire in the world. Listed in the Guinness Book of World Records for quite some time. It was something like 6,000 to 7,000 logs when completed, something like 50 to 55 feet high. So all kinds of questions tonight about the bonfire itself and the engineering behind it. Channel 8's Doug Fox has more on that.
Anyone involved in construction knows there are stresses and strains involved. When support columns are weakened or stressed, the structure collapses. Building implosions are an example of what happens when the support structure fails. In the case of the Aggie bonfire, it's dependent on a center pole buried up to 20 feet in the ground with tons of wood stacked around it and tied together with wire. A first layer is built, then a second, a third, and a fourth layer, all stacked on top of one another, reaching up to 55 feet in the air.
What we always did in the middle is we always had a pipe or a hose that went up to center pole, so that when it was finished, we could then take jet fuel, kerosene, and saturate the inside of that center pole, so when the yell leaders threw the fire on it, it would take off.
The bonfire is getting lit now. You're going to see flash bulbs going off all over the world.
It's not clear precisely what happened this year, but Hal Watson of SMU's School of Engineering says the center pole obviously was stressed.
Regardless of how deep it's in the ground, there will be a high-stress region right here at the ground level if there's an unbalanced load pushing against it one side versus the other. So the trick is to balance the load, but if you don't, then you put the pole into stress. So if there is an imbalance of load.
Using a simple stick, Watson says the principle is the same.
There it is.
Watson says a tragedy might have been averted had they used a steel center pole plus guy wires attached to the pole to prevent the bending. It's not clear if guy wires were used this year or not. All it took was a sudden shift, and witnesses said in 5 or 6 seconds it was down, and at least 9 lives went with it. Doug Fox, Channel 8 News.
Back live now at College Station. I want you to take a look behind me, give you some idea of what's going on here. They are still working with quite a bit of heavy machinery surrounding what is left of the pile that at one time was some 40 to 45 feet high. But that work continues. They have apparently gotten the wire out that was used to string much of that together, but that makes it even more difficult, even more of a chance that this is unstable. Again, as we told you at the top of the hour, there are probably 2 people inside. We have no idea of their condition, but Scott and Gloria, as we go back to you, of course, we're still watching that, and we've got more for you a little later.
All right, thank you very much, John.
Well, as you would imagine, tonight a wave of grief has settled over the campus of Texas A&M University.
Whenever such a tragedy happens, many ask why and how do they help each other deal with the loss. We have with us this evening Denise Donofrio, and she's a counselor at Irving Christian Counseling Centers, and thank you for joining us, Denise. This is, as you mentioned earlier, a sudden loss, such as if you lost a child in a car accident, no way to prepare. So what do you tell those who have suffered the loss?
Typically what you see is people initially being in a state of shock, and their reactions are disbelief and a need to have a sense of control because of that. So allowing expression of control, such as you've seen people driving down there to be there to answer questions, to see what happened, to try to incorporate what's happened to them and be there. You've seen them surrounding each other, and that is such a helpful thing to do in the initial moments.
Denise, it's a terrible question that we have to ask, but in the past few months we've been asking it a lot. What do parents tell their children to try to calm their fears of these things happening?
Children typically take their cues from parents, from adults, and so what they see us do, they're going, if it's not talking about it, if it's pretending like it's a secret or something, they'll do that, but they need to express. They need to be able to share how they're feeling, whether that's fear, anger, sadness, guilt, all of those feelings. And so parents need to be able to allow for that expression and to model it and to say, I feel sad about this. How do you feel?
Mm-hmm. So we can get it out of the system.
Yeah, we've seen the Aggies here tonight. It's Highland Park United Methodist Church gather together, and they gather strength from each other. What else could they do for each other?
What typically is necessary is an ongoing process of grief expression. So in the days, weeks, and months to come, it needs to be continually asking, how are you doing? Let's not forget, let's memorialize, let's honor these lives that meant so much to us and continue to mean so much to us. It's the long-term process of grief that everyone needs help in.
Right, 6 months down the road.
6 months, a year,
right.
It'll never be the same again.
Right, a lot of folks don't know what to say, so that would help.
Yes, and saying I don't know what to say, I'm here for you, I'll listen.
That's good. Thank you very much.
Denise, thank you very much. Coming up, the Bonfire at Texas A&M is a decades-old tradition, but it was canceled once before because of another tragedy.
We'll explain after this.
This is a tragedy that no one saw coming, that no one could have prevented. It's something that's never happened before, and it came out of the blue.
Tragedy at Texas A&M, a News 8 special, continues when we return. Tragedy at Texas A&M, a News 8 special, continues.
People who are familiar with Aggie history know that the Bonfire tradition was broken only once until now, and that was because of a tragedy. It was Don Crawford's senior year. This is how he looked in his cadet uniform. He remembers how they were building the bonfire when President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. He and his classmates decided it was not a good time for a bonfire.
Our class and the rest of the Corps decided that we would basically, in honor of the President, not light Bonfire that year. So basically we took the logs down and laid them out and canceled Bonfire.
Crawford is now the president of the Corps of Cadets Association. Usually they recruit cadets. Today, he spent much of the day talking to worried families about whether their cadets had survived.
A&M alumni are feeling the depth of the tragedy as if each student involved was a member of their own family. Still, many hope the bonfire tradition will continue. Channel 8's Anita Vanetti reports.
Using super sensitive listening equipment to try to find survivors.
Texas A&M alumni Brant Ince has been watching events unfold with dismay and disbelief.
There's nothing worse than walking around with a pit in your stomach from 5 o'clock in the morning all day. It's unbelievable.
A 1991 graduate, Ince keeps close ties with Aggies across the country and heads the Dallas chapter of the Association of Former Students.
That was probably 1989.
Ince remembers the times he helped light the bonfire.
Let's go light a fire!
He was a member of the Corps. He was not a cheerleader, but rather a yell leader.
After the Aggies win their home games, the freshmen and the Corps cadets tackle the yell leaders and carry them off and throw them in a pond.
Ince's memories mirror the lifelong feeling of kinship that A&M's unique traditions inspire. He says the majority of alumni hope this incident will not lead to the end of the bonfire event because they believe its flames unify the students.
It's extremely important. It's part of the fabric of the university. People who are in the Corps, people who live in the dorms, the fraternities, the sororities, everybody has a part in it, and it's probably one of the more visible symbols for Texas A&M.
Many people want the huge ritual to be stopped permanently because they believe it's gotten too big and too dangerous. Ince says as his heart goes out to all the victims and their families, he feels the tragedy was an accident, that it was a once-in-a-lifetime disaster that should not cause the end of a decades-long tradition. Anita Vanetti, Channel 8 News.
And we'll be back after this.
Texas A&M, a News 8 special, continues when we return. Tragedy at Texas A&M, a News 8 special, continues.
They are football rivals, but the tragedy is being felt at UT in Austin.
Channel 8's Alan Berg has more from Austin.
Scott, it's been a solemn evening here at the state capitol. At 9 o'clock, several hundred people gathered for 20 minutes of silence. That was then followed by prayer, by an Aggie fight song, and many people have stayed around. They're talking to each other. They just want to be with others who share their tradition. At the University of Texas this afternoon, students crossed the campus under flags that flew at half-staff. The university also decided to cancel its Monday pep rally and hold a candlelight service instead. The UT football team ended practice today with a prayer, and the team's trying to decide how best to commemorate this tragedy at next week's game.
It's very, very difficult for a head coach that's 48 years old to understand, and for me to even think about losing a child as a parent is really hard.
This rivalry dates back to 1909 and defines Thanksgiving weekend for many Texans, but now tragedies altered tradition. In addition to the canceled pep rally on Monday, the University of Texas is going to darken the tower that night to memorialize the students. They're also going to pass out ribbons that are white, because white is a shared color of A&M and the University of Texas. Scott, Gloria?
All right, Alan Berg in Austin, thank you very much. Now let's go back to College Station. Channel 8's John McKay is there. John?
Well, Scott, let me tell you a couple things that we've just learned in just the last few minutes, and that is that apparently the rescuers do have a visual on two people who are inside of the pile. They do not have any means of communicating with them, but we're told that there are two people, a woman and a man, who are inside the pile. And the rescuers can see them, but again, they don't have any means of communicating with them at this hour. I wanted to bring in right now a guest who has joined me, who is Bill Minutaglia with the Dallas Morning News, who has been here much of the day talking to people around College Station. You've been trying to sample, I guess, the opinion, the ideas, folks. You tell me that there really isn't any line between the city of College Station and Texas A&M University.
It's really a boundaryless campus, in my opinion. The school is the town, and the town is the school, and what I'm detecting is really a collective sense of tragedy.
You know, I guess the amazing thing to me, Robert Riggs and I were talking about this earlier, is that we have, ordinarily when something like this happens, there are those students who do not understand the seriousness of it. There are people around town who don't. But in this case, every person, to a person we have seen, everyone seems to have joined us. You were at one of the memorial services today and saw the same thing?
Exactly. A few hours ago at a Bonfire memorial service at Reed Arena, which is normally a very boisterous place held for graduation exercises and basketball games. You could hear a pin drop in there. There were 14,000 people in there, and really the only sound was the sound of people crying.
I heard also that you talked to some clergy people and heard from them that they've been getting calls from people, not even from Texas.
They've been inundated. Talked to several clergy members, as you said. They've been getting phone calls from literally around the country from concerned parents wondering, what can they do? But beyond that, can you locate our sons and daughters for us and let us know that they're okay? The Red Cross here, we talked earlier about how there's been apparently quite a few people in Houston who had gone to donate. Heard anything from them today? Oh, they've been busy, and they've been very gratefully busy. In fact, I went over to the Red Cross Center. It was a 3 to 4 hour wait to donate blood, over 400 people waiting online, so they've been very pleased with the reaction.
Bill, you've been a reporter for quite some time. Have you ever seen any reaction quite like this? I'm from Nebraska. I've been to the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. I've been to several other places that are college towns, and I really haven't seen a reaction like this from students and from alumni.
It really is kind of a widespread tragedy. You can almost feel the drain on the city from one end to the other, from Bryan to College Station, both ends of the two cities, and I really have never seen anything like it.
Okay. Bill, thanks a lot. Certainly appreciate that report from you. Scott and Gloria, back to you.
Well, still ahead, the tragedy at A&M is the talk of the town.
How people found comfort on talk radio when this special edition of News 8 continues.
Tragedy at Texas A&M. A News 8 special continues.
Governor Bush says he is deeply saddened by the tragedy at Texas A&M.
A lot of people are hurt, and it's sad. It's tough. And I'm a little emotional about it because I got a great attachment to Texas A&M. And my heart goes out to the parents. I just can't imagine what it means to have that happen to them.
Bush's father, former President George Bush, has his presidential library at Texas A&M. The former president also attended tonight's prayer service in College Station. So what happens now? In the future, will there still be a bonfire, or will this tragedy put an end to a near century-old tradition?
It's definitely a question on the minds of many people. Today, on the talk shows on the radio, it kept the phone lines humming, as Channel 8's Bill Brown reports.
They have detected at least one more person they believe to be alive in the stack.
When something this awful happens and people are hurting, often they feel a deep need to talk to somebody about it. So many of them call into radio talk shows. On Dallas station KLIF, host Billy Hayes spent the whole morning on the sad subject.
The question is do you put college students at that known risk for entertainment value?
A woman identified only as Terry called in as she was driving down to College Station to be with her son. He had been at the very top of the log pile.
And he rode the stack down and stayed on the logs until he was about 20 feet above the ground, and then he jumped as far as he could and just started rolling. He knows two of the people that died, and they were right next to him.
Luckily, their son came out of it with only minor injuries. So after this, will the bonfire go on or never burn again?
I guess if you put me to it, I'd fall down on the side of letting it continue.
As I sit here today and talk about the idiocy of building this thing at 3 o'clock in the morning, please understand.
Over at WBAP in Arlington, Mark Davis was raising another question. Just why were the Aggie students up on that timber pile in the dark?
The brain is not as alert at night and doesn't function as well.
But many of the callers quickly came to the defense of the students.
But I have watched that bonfire and saw the enthusiasm that school has.
It's something like you've never experienced before. Unless you've done it, you can't understand.
Well, should it?
It's a very unique and intense experience.
All right, do you want it to continue then?
Oh, definitely so.
Sometimes all good things must come to an end, and times change.
A lot of Aggies called in to say the bonfire is a key symbol of the unity, the leadership, and the team spirit on this campus. 7 out of 10 of the callers said in some form it has to go on.
It's a tragedy what happened. It's actually very horrible, but Aggies are like family. From the day you step on campus to the day you die, you're a family, and you stick together. And I think that the decision to keep the bonfire going or to stop it ought to be an Aggie decision.
And that mother whose son survived, she said she has doubts, and so does he.
His first thought on that whether or not to keep the bonfire going this time was, no. But they're so devastated, they don't know what to think. But I don't think they could be part of something else and somebody get hurt again.
Yeah.
I think they couldn't cope. The kids that are in charge of this couldn't cope with that again.
Bill Brown, Channel 8 News.
And we'll have more thoughts on the tragedy when our report continues.
I was dazed. I was kind of thrown against the logs, but for a while I could see a few people trying to jump off of stack, trying to get out from on top of it, out from underneath it.
Tragedy at Texas A&M, a News 8 special, continues when we return.
Well, I've been talking for quite some time now about a number of events that have happened here at Texas A&M University in the past year, and some very serious tragedies. Channel 8's Brad Watson reports right now upon what's now being called the A&M Hex.
As rescuers picked through that huge pile of timber, log by log, the rest of us began picking through the possible reasons why another tragedy happened related to Texas A&M that took many young lives. In our collective minds, the timing is suspect. There have already been 2 other occasions in just the past 2 months when those with some connection to the school died. The A&M family of students and alumni take it hard.
Every tragedy is like, part of your family, and you feel for, the families that, are involved so closely, and it's been a hard year for Texas A&M.
Oh, I don't think there's a hex by any stretch. It's more or less just a run of bad luck. They say bad things happen in threes, and it seems, I guess, more or less this is the 3rd one, so hopefully that's over with, and we can all get past this, and hopefully the victims and their families will get through this as well.
The A&M tragedies began in mid-September when 5 people died when a plane used by the Ags over Texas Skydiving Club crashed. Students and alumni often use that plane. Then on October 10th, a pickup truck driver fell asleep west of campus and killed 6 students as they made their way to a fraternity party. 4 of the students were from Baylor, 1 from Southwest Texas State, and 1 from A&M. And now the Bonfire collapse. Why?
I wouldn't say it was bad luck. I would say it might be bad judgment.
At the Injury Prevention Center of Greater Dallas, they believe that injuries are not accidents. They're predictable.
Again, high-risk behavior, you have to be very sure about what the risks are involved when you're doing something like building a bonfire. I think the Injury Prevention Center believes that the majority of injuries are preventable.
What about the spiritual explanation of whether there's a hex on A&M, or any other group or person for that matter? Here at SMU's Perkins School of Theology, the question of whether there's some kind of divine pattern naturally comes up when bad things happen. Jim Kirby is a professor of church history and says people look for meaning after multiple tragedies, but they must remember, we live in a finite, imperfect world.
God and our faith call us to an awareness that even in times like this, we're not alone, that there are reasons why that God does not separate from that kind of an event any more than God separates from the good events in our lives.
Rescuers will eventually reach the bottom and know whether anyone else is buried. The answer to why so many deaths may still prove elusive. Brad Watson, Channel 8 News.
That's Brad Watson reporting live. Behind me now, what has been going on all day long. Really, now we have what I would characterize as a vigil. Several hundred students on this side of the log pile, and along the western side of it, there's quite a number of students as well, as they continue to wait and watch for this to all finally come to an end. I'm John McKay reporting live from Texas A&M. Scott and Gloria, back to you.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you for joining us for this special news report on the tragedy at Texas A&M.
The News 8 update.